I'm going to try and talk you through the comfort options for WipEout VR. Some of the options have got quite similar names, and some of the options aren't named that intuitively, so it can be a bit tricky to work out what the difference between them is. So when you start a race, or in this case a speed lap event, you'll be stationary and you won't go anywhere until you press X to start the race. So you should be able to set up your options before you go anywhere, unless you're playing an online multiplayer race, and then it's slightly different. So to get to your comfort options, you press the options button on your controller, and then go down to game options. And then these are your comfort options and also your controller options. So your first option is the camera. This sets whether you have an internal or an external view of the ship. At the moment we're using the internal cockpit view. Close view is an external view, so the camera is behind the ship but it's following it quite closely. The far view is the same again, but there's a bigger distance between the camera and the ship. Traditionally that's usually been the easiest and most accurate way to play WipEout in flat mode, but that's changed quite a bit now. Camera settings VR, which is not very helpfully quite similarly named to the first option, controls how the ship moves around you. So this option is sort of rolling side to side, how the ship moves around you or whether it moves around you. And then the camera option is more of a front to back option, how close you are to the ship or whether you're in the ship. So in camera settings VR, you can lock the camera to the cockpit, you can lock the camera to the track, or you can lock the camera to the pilot, and I'll show you the difference between those options in a moment. The headset settings VR, this is the blindness settings, so this controls how much you can see around you. At the moment the blinders are off, so I'm using the full width of the headset, full width of the headset screen. You can set it to a small, which cuts off the very edge of your peripheral vision, or you can set it to large, which covers all of your side vision really, so you can just see straight ahead of you. The field of view VR setting, all this setting does is control how the ship moves when it goes over a turbo pad. That's literally it. So it doesn't really do all that much. That's all you have to worry about with that setting, and it's only an on and off setting. And then motion sensor function. This is your 6-axis controls on your controller. So at the moment they're set to off. So to control the ship, I would use the stick or the D-pad. When it's set to pitch, I'd still use the stick or the D-pad to move the ship left or right. But I can tip the ship's nose up and down by tipping the controller backwards and forwards. And then pitch and steering, I can still tip the nose of the ship up and down, but I can also steer the ship left and right by tipping the controller left and right. And then motion sensitivity, that's quite a personal thing. You might find you like it more or less sensitive, depending on how you use the controller. So I'll set the camera to internal, and lock the camera to the cockpit, and we'll turn the blinders off. And we'll go through all of these settings and we'll see how they affect your view. So at the moment you can see that my body or my view is staying parallel to the track, but the two prongs of the ship, they're moving up and down around me, almost like they're spinning around the body of the ship. So when I go around a corner, the right side's flipping up, or the left side's flipping up, but my view is always staying level. If I change that so the view is locked to the track, you can see now that the whole ship is moving. The body of the ship is moving with the prongs of the ship, but my view is actually still staying parallel to the track. I'm not tipping with it at all. Then your third option is to lock the camera to the pilot. Locking the camera to the pilot may cause some users to experience motion sickness. Oh, we're fine with that. So now you see when I go around a corner, the whole ship is moving and my view is moving with it. So this gives you a much more WipEout-y, swooshy feeling when you go around the corners. But it'll also be, if you suffer from motion sickness, this will probably be the worst view for you possible. I'll try and exaggerate that when I go around the corner so you can see there really is quite a lot of movement with that, and that's not me moving my head at all. So go back to the first camera options and we'll set an external view. When your ship is using an external view, the camera settings VR, they don't seem to make any difference at all, or if there is a difference, it's so subtle I haven't noticed what it is yet. So this is your external view. You can see the whole ship ahead of you, and then you can see that the HUD is sort of floating on the screen in front of you instead of being on the dashboard of the ship, which feels a bit more like a traditional game really. Oh, that's not the setting I meant to change. Change to a far view. So same again, just slightly more different distance between me and the ship. When you're in this view, to my mind, it feels like you can feel the ship swinging across the track left and right a bit more. It's a bit more exaggerated. Now if I go in, just to show you, and I change the camera settings VR, which is the left and right, the kind of setting, you can see it doesn't really do much. So if I lock the camera to the track, still basically the same. The ship's still floating from left to right. It's not saying central to the screen or central to my viewpoint. Again, no real change there. Also, when you're flying with the external view, the blinder settings, they don't do anything either. So if I change, blinders. If I change that to large, which is the most extreme setting, again, no change. So we'll go back to the internal view. I'll turn the blinders back off, and I'll leave the camera locked to the cockpit because it's quite steady, it's easiest to see what's going on. And I'll just stop for a moment. So in this view I can look all the way around, I can look through, unless I look too high. If you clip through the top of the ship, your view will go black. So I can see out the windscreen most of the way around. Turn on the small blinders, you can immediately see that's quite different. My peripheral vision is cut off. I can no longer see out the roof much at all. But if you're quite photosensitive, or if flashing things bother you, especially on a track like Metropia, because you've got these dots going along the side which sort of flash as you whiz past them, it might be quite helpful. And then this is the large view, so now you can pretty much only see dead ahead of you. Very enclosed. If you do get motion sick easily, this will almost certainly be the most comfortable view for you. you're not tilting, the ship's doing all the tilting around you, and you've only got to worry about what's directly in front of you. So take the blinders off again, and then we can have a look at this field of view setting. So at the moment this is off. I'll turn it on. What this does is when you go over a turbo pad, it sort of rushes you forward a little bit, so you get a bit of a whoosh as you're going over the turbo pad. It feels like you're surging forward just a little bit. And if you look at the very tips of the prongs on the ship, you'll notice them sort of reach forward just a little bit with this setting on. So if I try and do a lap and go over some turbo pads, you see what I mean? If I don't accelerate, it's quite exaggerated. You can see that, and then if I turn it off again, you should see when I go over a turbo pad it's much smoother. There's none of that lurching forward. So again, if you're extremely sensitive to motion sickness, that'll probably be quite helpful. If I don't accelerate over this one, you can see it didn't pull forward at all. It's just a smooth transition. So your last two options are the controller options, the motion sensor functions, or your 6-axis controls. So at the moment they're set to off, so that will be using the stick to go left and right and also to tip the nose up and down. If I set them fully on, you can see if I tip my controller left and right, it moves the ship left and right. Or if I tip it up and down, it moves the ship up and down. You can also use the stick when you're controlling it this way at the same time if you really want to. So that's using the stick. I haven't had to change any options there. This is completely using motion controls and a little air braking. Or if that's a bit full on, you can set them to pitch only. And this can be quite handy if you're trying to lift the ship off the track to get some air to do a barrel roll. You can quite easily pitch the nose down and back up while steering left to right. So now I can tip the ship up and down, but if I move the controller left to right, it does nothing. There aren't really any good barrel roll spots on this track, so I can't really show you that, but that would probably be your best use for it. And the only other thing I can really tell you that's worth noting is if you want to change your view quickly, so say you wanted to go from an internal view to an external view because it was doing your head in, you don't have to go back to the menu to do that. You can just press triangle and that will give you a different view. So that's internal, external close and external far. So that's a much quicker way of doing it if you just want to, if you're in an online race or something and you just want to change it quickly. So I hope you found that helpful, and I hope that explains the options a bit better for you. If you've got any questions, leave them in the comments and I'll try and answer them.